what's it like to get your dad back for 5 minutes only to just have the disease kind of like snatch him away from you moments later?
I love that question because the periods of lucidity were actually longer. And so I don't think there's any form of dementia or Alzheimer's, because I feel like most of us have probably experienced it peripherally, at least with someone in our families or a friend or a, acquaintance. But Lewy body dementia is nonlinear because there are days where the progression is really bad. And then there are days where the progression will actually trick people into thinking that the person is better or not declining as fast as they initially thought. So it can be confusing to kind of like create a path of treatment, because you can't, at least with, I'll say regular Alzheimer's or, one of the many, I think there are over 200 forms of dementia. Don't quote me on that, but there's quite a few different types of dementia. It's more of like a steady progression. You know that you're going down the slope, but for him, some days it was like he would dive off a cliff and then the next day he'd be back on the ledge again.
Wow.
What are the, I think I'm most familiar. I'm only really familiar with Lewy body in name as a form of dementia. Like I've heard of it. I know we've had a lot of conversations around like Alzheimer's, and I know that Parkinson's is a form of dementia as well, which obviously primarily or starts primarily in the body and then progresses into the mind like later. So like what are some of the, and this can be obviously very specific to your dad, but like what are some of like the sort of like hallmarks of Lewy body?
So I'm glad you said that. Parkinson starts in the body and then moves to the brain. Lewy body starts in the brain and then moves to the body. So that was kind of the thing that we missed, which we can get into, because he was a perfect storm of a misdiagnosis. It happened during COVID, and they live in rural Cape Breton, and so his access to a neurologist here in Halifax, with travel being limited to the county that they lived in, was super limited. And so he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's, and that's what he was being treated for. And then when we saw the neurologist, I think it was 3 years later, none of the symptoms she had initially diagnosed him with matched the trajectory of Parkinson's. But for him, it was hallucinations. So it started in the brain. They had seen a tremor in him, and he had kind of like the blood pressure issues that are pretty common in Parkinson's. And he was a musician, and Parkinson's affects your voice.
Right.
And so his tolerance for things like cold, which I don't know, I mean, I'm sure you guys know this, you spend enough time on stage, but like backstage in the green room, they keep it quite cold. And then you go out on stage, his fingers would get frozen. Backstage.
Not to mention fucking Cape Breton.
Yeah, exactly. The weather was not kind.
For those of you who aren't familiar, it's
not Halifax.
It's fucking windy and it's cold.
Yeah.
We get, if it's a snowy day here, it's a goddamn fucking blizzard up there.
Yeah, you bet.
I do want to say before you jump in there, Brian, just about the common types of dementia. You were right that there's over 100 with estimates sometimes reaching around 200 types of dementia. And they are broadly categorized into common forms like Alzheimer's disease and vascular dementia.
Yeah.
And other types such as Lewy body dementia and frontotemporal dementia. So Alzheimer's disease is the most common type, primarily affecting memory, thinking, and behavior. Vascular dementia is caused by reduced blood flow to the brain, often due to strokes or high blood pressure.
Yeah.
Dementia with Lewy bodies is an umbrella term for several types of dementia, including Parkinson's disease dementia. And then frontotemporal dementia, FTD. This group of dementias affects the frontal and temporal lobes of the brain.
Mm-hmm. So when we think of, I'm just going to broadly group them into memory-eating diseases. We think of it kind of like a black hole where memory kind of gets pulled away slowly. Lewy body is kind of like a trickster because it's a buildup of protein on the brain that, I mean, it can land anywhere in the brain. It can land everywhere in the brain. And it kind of mimics the symptoms as far as we saw, but that's why you get that crazy fluctuation in symptoms.
So in the way that, like, in the famous Heritage Minute commercial, the I smell burnt toast.
Dr. Penfield.
So like the protein is sort of like pressing on or like building up in certain areas.
Up. Yeah, exactly.
That just like ends up either stopping the brain from functioning in certain areas, like the burnt toast thing. Like, I mean, specifically with the burnt toast thing, when they pressed on that, they were like, oh, this is where it is. But like with the protein buildup, is it only limiting the brain function in those areas where the protein is building up more?
As far as I understand, and that's, I feel like it's common knowledge now, but that's what Robin Williams passed away from, was Lewy Body Dementia. Mm-hmm. But for Dad, it kind of happened similarly, where it built up, we know, on the centers of his brain that should have been controlling his anxiety. Because for somebody who never experienced anxiety and was a performer for over 40 years, he suddenly couldn't leave the house.
When you said that, they initially diagnosed him or thought it was Parkinson's.
Yeah.
Is that like a missed diagnosis in the sense that you mentioned like Parkinson's and Lewy body are like sort of reversed? So if it started in the brain and moved to the body, then is that like Parkinson's basically catching it late?
Yeah, they had kind of followed the tremor in his hand, and he was having some muscle issues, and so they thought because he was having physical symptoms first in a really mild way, they felt confident diagnosing him with Parkinson's. And then the cognitive stuff hit really fast and hard. He and my mom lived in Bedeck in Cape Breton for the summertime. Cape Breton's a very seasonal place for work, and it was kind of a central location for him to go to his gigs. So my mom worked on site at a hotel, and they had a little apartment set up. And so he would be home during the day, kind of independently making her lunch and going to visit her for coffee and doing his thing. He was also a photographer. He really liked taking pictures.
Which is what you do.
Which is what I do. I'm not going to say that I got him back to photography, but I'll take credit. I did. So there was one afternoon, my partner went home to meet my folks in August, and this is how fast the decline happened. I just like to give this for context because it still feels a little surreal to me. It was August of 2021. We went home. We stayed with them. He played guitar, and he and I sang for my partner, and he drove my then new car. And then in September, my mom called and said she was kind of laughing because in hindsight, you think about it differently. But she had been hearing a car alarm all day on the property. And when she got home, he had the car keys and was crouched in the apartment setting off the car alarm because he had hallucinated people sitting in his car, and he was convinced they were trying to steal it.
Whoa.
And so we kind of laughed about it at the time because we knew the hallucinations would come eventually, but they were supposed to be innocent, like babies and kids, and nothing that's really scary for the person seeing them.
What? Why? Like, why do you say they were supposed to be innocent? That's the typical.
That's the progression. Is the neurologist had said with Parkinson's, eventually he'll start to see babies and kids, and like sometimes pets.
Oh wow!
Is a super common hallucination.
Huh.
Interesting yeah.
It does sound fun.
He hallucinated my childhood dog all the time.
Okay. So he did have the cute ones.
He did have the cute ones.
But also the scary ones where there's random people in your car.
Yeah, and they would just watch him, and he was convinced that they were going to steal the car. And so he, unbeknownst to her, had been setting off this car alarm all day and scaring the guests on the hotel property, and we kind of laughed about it.
Right.
And then in hindsight, by October, they had moved home. By November, she knew they weren't going back next year.
Oh wow.